Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Morris, I want to talk to you today about Roman geography. What about Roman geography? Well, we're going to talk about how Rome was able to expand and grow all throughout the ancient Mediterranean area, all due to their location and their geography. We're going to be going over three vocab words today, words you've already know a little bit about: peninsula, plain, and climate. So, what about Roman geography? Well, Rome is settled, the ancient city is settled right here in this Italian peninsula. It looks a lot like a boot. And when it first settled here around 700 BC, this green area were the Etruscans, which we'll talk a lot more about when we get to Roman history. And down here at the bottom, this yellow area are the Greeks that settled here away from Greece uh, before 700 BC. So Rome was stuck here in the middle between two powers, the Etruscans and the Greeks. But as you look at this map over here, they were able to spread out and grow quickly all around the ancient Mediterranean area. And here's that boot again, because of three main reasons. We're going to talk about that today. First of all, location, location, location. You can't beat where they were. They were at a place called the midpoint of the Mediterranean, which is right there in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. And their climate, which is a fancy word for weather, was very mild and very perfect for growing crops. Their main crops were olives, grapes, and grains for farming. Once again, olives, grapes, and grains. It never got lower than 50 degrees at any given time in their wet winters, and it never really got any hotter than 85 degrees in their dry summers. Perfect for growing. The people there are known as the Latins because they came from an area known as the Latium Plain, which is a flat surface in and around the seven hills in which they built their city. And this plain was great for growing crops because of the type of soil that was there. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Rome was built on several hills, as I mentioned earlier, seven hills for protection. Because if you've ever played the game King of the Hill, it's better to be on top looking down than trying to get on top and get rid of the person on top. So great for protection. They were built next to the Tiber River, which is a river that cuts into the middle of the peninsula, and they can sail out. Again, they were not built on the side of the peninsula, all right? They were not built right on the coast. They were built back on the Tiber River, which is also great for transportation, but perfect again for protection. And finally, they're located in the very middle of that Italian peninsula and the very middle of the Mediterranean. Great for expansion. Here's a cartoon of the seven hills where they built their city. It was all in different places all around these hills. Here is a picture of the Tiber River cutting through the middle of that peninsula area. And Rome was built back from the Tiber River. And again, not on the coast, but built back from there. And then here is a bigger map of the boot. And because it is in the middle of this Mediterranean, here's the Mediterranean Sea, Rome was able to expand quickly. And as you can see, everywhere around here would be the area in which they would later develop and take over. Let's watch part of this film that was made by another gentleman that does a really nice job explaining this. Oops, we jumped ahead. Let me go back and try that again. Here we go.
Hello, historians. I'm Mr. Fredo. Very excited today. We get to begin our mini lessons for ancient Rome and what will eventually become the Roman Empire. So, today, to get us started, almost as always, we'll start with the geography of Rome, the city, and the country it's within, or what will eventually be within, Italy. But what we really want to focus on is how the Romans absolutely, positively luck out with where they first established their initial civilization. So, to get us started, this would be a more contemporary map of the continent of Europe. But for the Romans, they start off right here. That's it, the western coast of central Italy, in a very, very small area, right along the Tiber River, in an area that's surrounded by seven different hills. You'll probably hear a lot in our readings and our discussions about the seven hills of Rome. These different hills kind of help surround the city and give them a huge strategic advantage in terms of being able to defend themselves from early attacks. But in some ways, similar to ancient Greece, our previous unit, because there is a mountain range that runs straight through the Italian peninsula, the Apennine Mountains. But the difference is Number one, it doesn't completely engulf where they're from and where they settle. It's just kind of one of their borders. Another huge difference is the Romans have what we consider to be a lifeline river, the Tiber, a fresh water source as they're getting started. The ancient Greeks certainly did not. But in terms of our big focus with the Romans and their geography and where they settle, we really want to focus on what makes their location so lucky. Here's Rome. We already know one reason they're lucky is they're not completely surrounded by mountains. The Apennines kind of run right through central Italy. They have that lifeline river, the Tiber. That's another way that they luck out. They're also lucky in terms of their access to the coast. It's going to give them some movement later on. But what they really luck out with is their neighbors. Where they settle is sandwiched directly between two other massively impressive ancient civilizations, and that's to the north, the Etruscans, and to the south, our good friends, the Greeks. And this is a truly momentous opportunity for the ancient Romans because both of these civilizations, the Etruscans and the Greeks, are already, by the time Rome is being founded in the late 700s BCE, the Etruscans have already long established themselves as being great engineers, as being great writers, and the Greeks have already long established themselves as architects, thinkers, creators of different forms of government, namely direct democracy. And the Romans have this great advantage of simply being where they are and taking these ideas and then refining them and making them better into their own. For example, the Etruscans had this great engineering idea called a caniculus, and it was an underground trench that was used to carry water from one place to another. The Romans eventually adapt that idea for their aqueducts, those large bridges that are going to carry water over a long area to the cities. The Greeks, on the other hand, come up with direct democracy. The Romans will eventually adjust that into what becomes the Roman Republic, where instead of rule by the people and directly voting, the Romans will elect senators, and the senators will make decisions on behalf of the people. But again, they were chosen by the people to begin with. So cannot be overstated the importance of this location and how it gives the Romans a true jump start in their ability to start establishing it, the greatest empire the world had ever known at that point. This is like the Romans today. If your neighbor doesn't lock their Wi-Fi and you're just taking their internet from them and you don't have to pay for internet, that's essentially what the Romans get to do in the 600s, 500s, 400s, 300s BCE, and they have the benefit of taking all of these great ideas from these two very, very impressive ancient civilizations, and they use those ideas to give them the jump start to the point where they're eventually going to take over much of the known Mediterranean world at that time as we look.
All right. I think that film does a nice job kind of getting into and explaining a few different things. So let's get to the next part of this.
The
And
start of the empire and beyond.
the next part of this has to do with, all right, jumping over here. I want to talk about the aqueducts. As he said in the film, the Etruscans come up with the idea called the caniculus, but it is the aqueduct in which water was brought into cities. And the Romans took the idea of this caniculus from the Etruscans, and it's quite ingenious. They put an intake valve, or a suction valve, if you will, into a mountain lake, and then they cut a trench, a tunnel into that mountain. Now we're talking thousands of years ago. And then they build this piece, this engineered piece that brings water across the valley and again back into the ground, so more in-ground piping and tunneling into the city. And then there's wastewater down here. This is ingenious. It lets gravity do its job. And here we are thousands of years later, and it really hasn't changed with what the Romans did back before the time of Jesus, thousands of years ago. It's incredible. As mentioned, the transportation has to do with the fact that they are right there in the peninsula, and they are by the Adriatic, the Ionian, and the Mediterranean Sea, which helped them develop trade routes and grow quickly. Also, being on the Tiber River gave them the ability to sail in and out of the uh, Italian peninsula and giving them access to the sea. Their expansion obviously had to do with the fact that they were there in the middle of the Mediterranean and right in the middle of the Italian peninsula. And this has a lot to do with roads. They built roads everywhere, these Romans did. And the roads would take them in and around the peninsula and later in and around all throughout their empire when they got that big. But why are these roads so important? Think of Rome as the heartbeat and think of these roads as veins spreading the Romans everywhere, like almost like blood. And they could go wherever they wanted on these amazing roads that are still there today and being used even still to this day by people living there. Here we are thousands of years later, and the roads are still being used. You could move armies and troops anywhere you wanted to go using these roads. You don't have to go over swamps. You don't have to go across mountains. You don't have to go into deep, dark forests. These roads cut paths everywhere you need to be, just like modern roads, and being able to walk safely anywhere you want to go. But it also brought trade and different types of product into Rome and out of Rome so that Rome could go to any of these cities and these areas that they would later one day control, and they could use this as a hub of trade and economy. And then the protection being built in and around those seven hills, nobody could attack them because of where they were at. It was perfect. You have the hills for protecting them, you have the Mediterranean and the Tiber for transportation, and you have the fact they were built in the middle of the peninsula and the middle of the Mediterranean for expansion. Those three things right there are incredible. And the last thing I want to talk about is their farming. They were built on this plain. The city was built on the plain, but they did a lot of farming in something called volcanic soil, which was a period of a lot of volcanoes throughout hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, culminating into the soil. The pumice in the rock being kind of crushed and pulverized into the soil, making it perfect for growing and raising crops. Again, their soil was amazing. The built in and around the mountains is amazing. The fact it was built in the middle of the Mediterranean and the fact it was built along the Tiber. It doesn't get any better in the ancient world. Hey guys, thanks for listening, and I hope you guys learned a little bit about Roman geography today.